A few weeks ago, we had to bury our family pet. She was probably close to 20 years old. When we got her, they said she was 5 years old, but they also said she was a Chihuahua and she didn't look like one, so I don't know. But anyway, when it came time to bury her, I held my son and daughter like next to me and we just sobbed. And it was that pain of loss, that grief. And if you've had a family pet, you know what it's like to say goodbye to a family pet. Or maybe you've lost a loved one in this life and you've grieved and grieved and grieved, and it's hurt so much because that loss it's such a huge change for us. And those feelings are natural feelings. They're the way that our bodies are designed to process loss. And honestly, it even happens when we have good losses, like a job change or a move that we're excited about. It can still be a loss because you're changing what you knew to something that you don't know, and you're saying goodbye to what you had. And in all of those circumstances, it's really important that we pay attention to the process of grief. Grief includes, some people say that it's this tangled ball of emotions, and it can be. Some people talk about stages of grief as if it could go neatly from one stage to the other. But the reality is it kind of goes back and forth all over the place. However, when it doesn't, then it can get stuck inside of us. What I mean is we may be more prone to either ignoring our feelings when it comes to a loss of any kind, whether it's good or hard or really, really hard. We can put on a brave face, fake brave face, and say, it's all fine, I trust God, we're good, which really does not connect to the reality of the loss. Note that Jesus did not disconnect from the reality of loss in the Garden of Gethsemane. He bled tears, like his tears were drops of blood because the vessels were what I understand is that they were bursting, and it was actually sweat drops of blood from his tears. That is deep, deep anguish. He felt the loss. He didn't deny it or ignore it. So one way that we tend to not process our grief is by denying it. We can also hyper-spiritualize it, and that's part of the denial process for some of us, and just say, God's in control, I trust God, which is true in aspects that we may need to hold on to as truths in the grieving process. But when it's our only go-to, it can be very disconnected also to how God brings us into victory, how God shows up for us. He can't show up for us if we don't even have any need for him. And so if we don't cry, if we don't get angry, if we don't go through the different emotions that come with loss and grief, how can he meet us in them? How do we get to actually experience the victory of trusting God? He meets us in those painful feelings, and he meets us in the future when we experience more healing or the pain has lessened and we're moving into different things, whatever that looks like. So we can deny it, we can hyper-spiritualize it, and we can also neglect the realm of emotions that grief brings. And the two key ones are sadness and anger. Some of us, me, myself included for sure, struggle with being okay with anger. And what ends up happening is it's not that we don't feel anger, we just have a hard time expressing it until it explodes. So rather than being honest with the anger and the doubts that come through a grief process, and it can be anger with God. I can't believe that this happened. Why didn't you step in? Those are natural human responses, and we don't want to get stuck in those for sure. But to be dishonest about the fact that they're happening can keep that anger bottled up. Or it can be the sadness. For some people, it's easier to express anger, and it's less difficult, it's harder to express the sadness that goes with it. Or you can feel so afraid of the grieving process and allowing those emotions to come out, whether it's the sadness or the anger or other emotions, because it can feel like you're going to get swallowed up in them. And so I have another video on 3 tips for when emotions overwhelm us, ways that you can kind of process and work through the emotions. But today I just want to encourage each of us to consider the reality of grief as part of our lives and allow ourselves to go through a grieving process. Even if it's short term, maybe for small losses, I've been intentionally just taking a few minutes to allow the tears to form for changes in my life that were good. That I just started to feel the tears and they came, and so I let them and just felt them, and then I also thanked God, kind of like the Psalms does. It goes through a series that you frequently see in Psalms is this expression of sadness or hurt or despair or whatever, but choosing to hope. And so doing that in the smaller griefs, but then also the larger ones that may need to take several experiences, several incidents of working through those emotions. And I also use a tool called Unleash Sheets to work through some of those emotions. But don't deny the feelings that are there. And I encourage your heart to connect with God honestly with the emotions, because He already knows that they're there. And pretending doesn't do anything to bring about healing. So just encourage you to explore those and to allow those to be processed, especially with a safe person and through prayer with God. He will meet you in them, and it won't last forever. It won't take you under, but you will get to experience blessings on the other side of working through the process of grief. Take care, friends.